So this is Secrets of Success in the Small Shop. And Sandy shows nonprofit leaders how to fully fund their big vision so they can spend more time changing lives instead of worrying about money. She's helped dozens of small nonprofits go from nickel and dime fundraising to adding six figures to their bottom line. We all like that. Fundraising was a hot topic at Friday night's meeting. It was basically one of our top pain points. As a trainer, she shows her students how to find ideal donors, connect through authentic messaging, and build relationships that stand the test of time so that fundraising becomes easy and predictable. Find out more about Sandy's programs at www.getfullyfunded.com. And so I'd like to welcome Sandy, and we're going to learn everything about fundraising today.
Well, hi, everybody. And thanks, Stacy, so much for inviting me to be here. I don't know that I can share everything about fundraising, but I can give you some really good ideas that you can use right away, like ideas that you could turn around and use tomorrow morning if you wanted to, or even today. I love showing small organizations how to raise money and how to create fundraising that isn't stressful and maybe even a little bit fun. And I love this picture. This is my cat Ginger. She was actually snuggling up with me this morning just a little while ago. She's totally adorable. Well, we're going to jump in, and just so that everybody knows, if you've got questions as we go, feel free to type those in the Q&A box, and I'll keep an eye on that. We're going to be talking about secrets of success in the small shop, and I'm going to guess that most of you work in an organization. I'm going to guess most of you are nonprofit, and we would definitely classify you as small shop. It's either that it's just you, maybe you don't have any help, maybe it's an all volunteer organization, maybe you've got a small budget size. Whatever, you're in the right place. I know that a lot of people who work in animal rescue are very passionate about what they do, and I'm sure you all are as well. Usually got big vision, and what you want money for is basically to make everything easier. And money would help you grow your programs or add programs. Maybe you'd just like to hire staff or pay yourself. I just did this webinar a week or so ago, and everybody, like, their virtual hands shot up and they all went, holy moly, yes, if I could pay myself, that would be amazing. And maybe you'd just like fundraising to be easier. That's what I want to show you how to do today, is to set up good, what we call donor-based fundraising, so that you can stop begging, you can stop selling things, you can stop panicking going from one fundraiser to the next, and start to create some sustainability and predictability. Because I'll tell you what, I've been in both places. It's so much more fun when it's a little more predictable and sustainable. So what I'm going to share today, and be ready to take some notes because I've got some great stuff that you're going to want to jot down. So make sure you've got a pen or a marker, crayon, something handy, and some paper. I'm going to talk specifically around why your fundraising may not be bringing in the money that you need right now, what's going on, and how to fix that. And then I'm going to give you my 3-part formula for successful fundraising. And this is where we're going to spend the bulk of our time. I'm going to give you the 3 parts, and then we're going to dig into the 3 parts. And I'm going to give you some very practical tools that you can use right away in each part of that. And then we're going to look at the 1-10-1000 rule. This is something that I've shared with probably tens of thousands of people at this point, and everybody loves it. It makes so much sense, and it'll give you a really good place to start from if you're not sure what to do. So this is going to be really helpful for you if you've been doing what I call throwing spaghetti at the wall. You've been trying things. You've tried a couple of things, and maybe some things worked, maybe they didn't work. You're not really sure why they worked or why they didn't work. And you'd like somebody to just say, look, here's what you need to do in 2018 to raise big bucks this year. That's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you some insight into what that needs to look like for you this year, so you can raise some big money. Yes? Okay. Does that sound good? Woo! Everybody says yay. All right. I know an awful lot of you have probably never heard of me before. Who the heck is Sandy Rees? I'm a fundraising coach and trainer. I spend a lot of time showing small organizations how to raise money. I've spoken at the Best Friends Conference, at the Michigan Humane what is that? It's called MPAW. I've been at Virginia Federation of Humane Societies many times, the Animal Care and Control in Tennessee, where I'm based. So I speak at a lot of conferences. Um, I also support other kinds of nonprofits, so not just animal welfare, but I would say about half of our clients, about half our business is animal rescue, animal welfare, animal shelters. So I'm going to be able to give you some real stories today about clients and groups that we're supporting that are doing some amazing things. And I'll tell you some of my own experiences as well. I've written a few books. We're actually going to give one of those away in a little while. I think that'll be fun. And because I know you guys are all cat lovers, I'll show you this is my crew. I live on a small farm, and we have other animals. We have 2 dogs and 2 horses, and we're fostering a couple of mini donkeys right now. But these are my cats. Cats have always been my first love. So we have in the top left, that's Ginger. Look at her nose. Isn't that great? It's like a little brown heart right on the middle of her face. Everybody loves that. The white one is Cosmo. He's a total nut. Down in the bottom left is our resident house panther. That's Astrid. And then the bottom right is Izzy. She's our newest one. She's actually bigger than that now. But those are the cats that I share my life with. Let me tell you my story before we go too far. I know sometimes it's easy when you come onto a webinar like this to think, yeah, the presenter knows all this stuff. They're the expert. They've got it all figured out. Here's what I want you to know. I did not always have this all figured out. I actually was not born with fundraising skills. And I don't remember signing up for fundraising at career day either. I'm trying to remember what did I want to do when I was that age. I don't think I knew that this wasn't it. Helping people raise money or raising money myself, I don't remember that ever being on my radar. I'm sure for you as well. Not really something that you were thinking about. In the late 90s, I was invited to sit on the board of the local rescue mission. I was actually doing marketing for a corporate staffing company. And I was invited to come sit on the board of the rescue mission, and of course I didn't know what that meant, and I said yes, and immediately was lost and overwhelmed. We could have a whole other conversation about boards and why your board is lost and overwhelmed, and that's a lot of it because they come on just like I did without knowing what they're saying yes to. So I was on that board for a while, and then about a year later they had a job open in their resource development office, and I looked at it and said, that's marketing, only we're selling a warm fuzzy, not a service or a product. And so I talked to the president of the organization. He and I decided I had the right skill set. So I resigned from the board, quit my job, took that job at the rescue mission. I've never looked back. It was like the skies opened and the angels sang, and I was where I was supposed to be at long, long last. So I was at the rescue mission for about a year and then moved over to the food bank. And that's where I learned a lot of things the hard way and a lot of things that still work and that I still teach people today. In fact, some of the things I'm going to share with you today, I figured out while I was there. I secretly always wanted to work at the Humane Society locally. And what I found out years later is that it was not a healthy environment. There were a lot of people that said, yeah, it's probably not a great idea. Anyway, so today, actually I started Get Fully Funded in 2005. Today I get to spend my time teaching people like you what they need to know about fundraising. And I still have my hands very involved in animal welfare. I sit on the board of Horse Haven of Tennessee. It's a horse rescue group. And I've just rolled out of my term as board chair. I'm now board treasurer. But I do a lot of the fundraising. I'm in charge of a lot. This is actually our board from our big fundraising event last year with our mascot Twinkie. Isn't he adorable? Very cute little guy. So I wanted to share that with you just to give you the context that I have not always known this. I figured some of it out. I can't stand to see people struggle. And so I want to share with you what I've learned the hard way so you don't have to struggle. And know that I still have my hands in animal welfare pretty much weekly. I'll actually be over at Horse Haven at the barn tomorrow for a little while. Take care of some treasure kind of stuff. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about small shop and what creates success in the small shop. Take a minute and just think about what would success look like. A very dear friend of mine, Whitney Bishop, always challenges clients to think, what would it look like if it worked? Just jot down some ideas of what would your situation look like if fundraising was working and it was successful. You probably would have your bills easily paid. Some of you are probably thinking, ooh, I would have a reserve. I would have maybe some debt paid off. I'd have a lot of money stashed. Some of you might be thinking you'd be saving money to either buy a building or buy some land, or maybe you need equipment or a van. You need to hire more people. The first step in moving toward what you want is to clearly identify what you want. You got to know what that end goal looks like before we can move you toward that. I think success in the small shop really is about knowing where the money is coming from. And what I mean by that is knowing that you have built the donor base and the relationships and the skills so that anytime you need money, you know how to raise it and you can do it easily without stress, without begging, without feeling yucky about it at all. To me, that's success. And every organization can do it. I've helped lots of really small nonprofits create that for themselves, and they come back to me and they say, oh my gosh, thank you so much. You just changed our world. That's where we're going. All right, so let's talk about fundraising. Yay! I know some of you going like, no, that's the F word. Maybe if you can make it easy, that'd be good. So I want to start by maybe debunking just a little bit anything that you might have going on in your head about what fundraising is or isn't. And we're going to talk about what it looks like when it works. Let's start with this truth. When you raise more money, you can change more lives. And what we might need to do is mark out change and put save. When you raise more money, you can save more lives. And that's the way it works in animal welfare. Yes? I watch with great interest the numbers of euthanasia across the board and how the numbers are coming down. And I think that's great. And I believe that it's small organizations who are going to make all the difference. I believe it's small nonprofits, rescues particularly, that have that ability to be very flexible and turn on a dime and reach further out into the community. And smaller organizations, in my opinion, just tend to be a little scrappier than the big organizations. And I think this is where the change is going to happen in our industry. So if we can get you more money, you can save more lives, and collectively we can stop so much killing of animals that could be bringing amazing joy to people's lives. So I want to look at some potential fundraising problems, and you see if any of these resonate with you. So fundraising problem number one is you might be barking up the wrong tree. You might be trying things that you really shouldn't try, or you're going after donors that are not interested in what you're doing. It doesn't happen as often, but several years ago, every time I talked to an organization, they would go, well, we need to approach the Gates Foundation. Bill Gates, he has a lot of money. If you're in Seattle, you probably have a shot, or if you're doing vaccination work in Africa, you might have a shot, but for the rest of us, not so much. I've had one client in 12 years that actually had a good shot at a grant from the Gates Foundation, and it was because they were doing work in India, and the guy's son-in-law worked at Microsoft, and I'm kind of like, well, okay, yeah, you probably got a shot. We'll try this. So barking up the wrong tree, you're just going after things that are not going to work. You might be doing fundraising backwards. Here's what that looks like. You're going out and trying to raise all the money you can and then bring it back and try to figure out how to spend it. That's backwards. What you need to do first is decide on the service that you want to deliver during the year, figure out what that's going to cost, and then go out and raise that amount of money. It's so much easier to talk to donors when you can say, look, we're trying to double the number of cats that we're saving this year, and here's what that's going to cost. Here's what it'll cost per cat. I'm actually going to give you a tool on that a little bit later. Donors will get more excited about that because they can envision how their donation is going to make a difference. Some of you may be doing sole source funding, which means you are living on a grant. You're living on a PetSmart grant. You're living on a grant from Best Friends or Maddie's Fund or someplace like that. That's really dangerous. And honestly, I've talked to all of those foundations and they all tell me they don't like it. They would prefer to see that you have diverse revenue streams. In other words, they want to see that you have money coming in from multiple sources. Maybe you've got a good event, you're getting grants from other places, you've got a big donor base, you've got maybe some monthly giving going on, because that creates stability. Your organization is much more stable when you have money coming from lots of different places. And we'll talk about that in just a little while. Some of you are throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall. You're trying out a lot of stuff, and I'll raise my hand. That's what I did when I was young in fundraising and don't know any better. I would watch what other organizations were doing, and then would try out a lot of it. And I wound up just trying this, trying that. And the problem with that is sometimes we don't give things a fair shake. We will try something, and the truth is, the first time you do something, it's not going to be nearly as successful as the third time you do something. So you might try, let's say, Giving Tuesday. It doesn't go as well as you want, and you go, well, that didn't work, and you go on to something else. When in fact, if you do Giving Tuesday again the next year, and then do it again and get smarter and better at it, you can really ramp it up, and you can raise a lot of money with something like that. So that's just one example. Some of you are using hope as a strategy. You're like, well, I hope that donations show up. I hope that somebody decides they want to give to our organization. And I'm just giggling because it's important to have hope and it's important to have faith, but that can't be your strategy. You've got to have an idea of what you want to do in terms of fundraising and raising money this year, how you're going to get the word out about what your organization does, how you're going to generate support, and then add hope and faith on top of that. Hope, it's not going to work real well if you do that. If you think, well, I'm going to do my work and I'm going to hope the money shows up. You're going to spend a lot of sleepless nights worrying about money if that's the case. All right, so hopefully some of that is resonating with you, or at least you're going like, okay, well, maybe that's what's going on with my organization. I find that everybody has at least one of those, and sometimes it's more than one that you go, yeah, that kind of describes my organization. So here's the deal. We all have done this kind of stuff. I told you I was throwing spaghetti at the wall like crazy until I figured out, oh, do it again, repeat it. Stop trying everything and focus on one or two things until you get it working. We have to learn. So don't put judgment on yourself about what's working or not working. Just draw a line in the sand and go, well, okay, that's the past, and now I'm gonna learn. I want to be smarter, and I want to go forward with more confidence and skill. So that's what I want to set you up for. There are a couple of different kinds of nonprofits as I see them. From the lens of fully funding your budget, we see organizations that are struggling. They tend to be underfunded. And then we see those that are on the path or already becoming fully funded organizations. And what that means is they know where the money's coming from. They've got a big loyal donor base. They've got diverse revenue streams. They're being smart. They know what's going on. So I want to show you some differences. And I think this will help you as well establish this context that I want to put together for you before we launch into the practical, tactical stuff. Underfunded organizations, those ones that struggle, tend to focus on fundraisers. They're doing calendar sales, and calendar sales are not a bad thing. I actually have a client that does about $40,000 on their calendar sale every year, which is not a bad thing. But if you're not fully going after it and it's only a little bit, and then you're doing a Chick-fil-A night, and then you're doing a car wash, and then it's a spaghetti dinner, and then it's a Buffalo Wild Wings night, those are fundraisers. And when you get all focused on those, you're missing the point. Good fundraising, donor-based fundraising, is about the donors, and fully funded organizations know that it's got to be about the relationship. Think about this for a minute. You know the story about the goose that laid the golden egg? You're at least familiar with that concept, that the goose, as long as you take care of that goose, is going to continue to lay the golden eggs. If you neglect the goose, the golden eggs will stop coming. And it's the same thing with your donors. Think of your donors as geese that are laying the golden eggs. They are very interested in what your organization is doing. They want to see you be successful. You have to take care of them. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a little about what that looks like to take care of those donors so those golden eggs keep coming. Underfunded organizations make decisions based on what's in the bank. So in other words, there's a whole lot of, we can't afford that. We can't do that. Fully funded organizations will make decisions based on vision. Once they realize there's a direction they need to go, instead of saying we can't afford that, they'll say, how can we afford that? How can we make that work? And they're looking for options. Underfunded just tend to shut down, and they don't look for options, and so they miss opportunities. Underfunded organizations tend to live from one cash infusion to the next. They get a grant, and that grant kind of carries them until they have their event, and that money kind of carries them until the holiday season, and that kind of carries them until the next thing happens. Fully funded organizations have a steady stream of revenue all year long. So it's not like, oh, we got to try to make it, we got to make it till our event in May. It doesn't work that way. They've got money coming in, usually from a lot of different sources. Underfunded can tend to have sole source revenue. Fully funded are diversified, like I just mentioned. Underfunded usually have bought into a poverty mentality. Fully funded are committed to doing whatever it takes. Here's what that poverty mentality looks like. We got to be real careful about this. It usually is, it's steeped in scarcity. So organizations that struggle think there's so much competition out there, and we're just a small organization. There's no way we'll ever raise big money. Well, guess what? If that's how you think about it, what is your reality going to be? If you believe you're just a small organization and you can't ever raise big money, what's your reality going to be? Your reality is going to be you're never going to raise big money. So we have to be very mindful. If you've got any of those kind of thoughts that run through your head, the first step is to acknowledge them and say, thank you for sharing. Please go away. Don't need that kind of negativity in my mind right now. And be very careful about letting those words come out of your mouth. The words are powerful. We don't want you talking about all the competition. Is there competition? Well, sure there is. There's like 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States alone, plus all the ones in other countries. But here's the thing. There are people out there right now who would love to support the work your organization is doing. They just don't know about you yet. They love their cats. They love the idea of saving more cats. They just can't personally take in anymore, but they would love to give you money to help you do what it is that you do. So we just got to get you out in the world and connect with these people to make that happen. Underfunded tend to settle for whatever they get. Fully funded organizations are not good with status quo, and they will find a way to overcome it. They're the ones who are looking for unique ways to solve problems. They're the ones that go, wow, what if we had different places in town that people could pick up traps for TNR and they didn't have to necessarily come to our office? Or what if our cat clinic stayed open later in the evening to accommodate those folks who work during the day? I mean, they're always looking for unique ways to solve problems, and it'll change the game. Here's the bottom line. Underfunded organizations are all about the money, and their fundraising tends to be very transactional. People give money, they get something in return. They're selling t-shirts, candles, candy bars, calendars, whatever it is. Fully funded understand that the goose is more important than the golden egg. So they're all about the relationship and the future donations. And I'm telling you, when I think about the organizations that we work with that are very successful and raising more money than they ever have, they get it about the relationship. And that's going to show up a lot as we go today. One more piece before we get into something that's a little more fun. This is the myth of the shoestring budget. The myth of the shoestring budget goes like this. If you have a nonprofit, your nonprofit is supposed to struggle. It is supposed to it's supposed to not have money. It's supposed to run on a shoestring all the time. And that's just not true. It's a total myth. It's perfectly okay for your organization to be a nonprofit and to raise enough money for you to have everything that your organization needs. Now, do you need to go buy gold-plated desks? No, but it's perfectly okay for you to be able to go out and get the office supplies you need, get the program supplies you need, hire the staff you need. It's perfectly okay. You don't have to run everything on a shoestring. So wanted to just go ahead and address that and get you thinking about that, like, oh, it really doesn't have to be that way. We have organizations, I have a lot of organizations that we work with that are in the process of starting to overcome that mindset and shift to, wow, we really can have the supplies we need. We can have a stash of cat litter back in the storage room so that we're not always in a bind trying to figure out how we're going to get more litter. I think it's time to do something. I think that, again, the numbers are dropping on euthanasia. A lot of things are getting better, but I think we can do so much more. I think there's so much more we can do to save these little babies like these two this is a photo from the Humane Society in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. They have done some amazing things in the last few years to save more cats. Everything from just getting more adopted out, to finding ways to save on veterinary expenses, to highlighting more of their cats on their social media. They're doing amazing work. Their numbers have dropped significantly in the past few years. I'm real proud of what they're doing. All right, what fundraising is and isn't. Good fundraising is donor focused. Again, it's not about the money, and yet it is about the money. I get that. You all need money to operate, but we have to lift our heads just a little higher and see the big picture. The big picture is that fundraising is about your donors and them being partners with you in making the work happen. Here's what that looks like. I guarantee you there are people out there like me who love the idea of saving animals, saving more cats. But I personally am so tender-hearted, I could not do it. In fact, when I go to like the shelter in Cape Girardeau or over in Boone, North Carolina, or in Dayton, Ohio, I have to just like gird myself up because I want to go in there and take every single one of those animals home, and I know I can't. That's really hard for me. I can't do the frontline work that some of you do. And so for me, the easiest place for me is to plug in and go, hey, let me show you how to raise money. And then, that's going to help you accomplish your mission. There are other people out there like that would love, love, love to help you do what you do, but they can't. Either they don't have time, or they don't have they don't, they don't have the intestinal fortitude for it, just like me. And it's easier for them to just write you a check or hit that donate now button. When they give big, when you have donors who are giving the larger donations, for some of you that might be 500, for some of you that might be 5,000, for others that might be even more. When somebody gives a large gift for them, it's transformational. It changes how they feel. It's not just transformational for you and your organization. For them, it changes how they feel. I mean, think about, for you, I want you to think for a minute about an organization that you give to that's not your own organization. And by the way, if you're not giving to another organization, I highly recommend it, because you need the experience of being a donor to see what that feels like. So for those of you who are giving to another organization, I want you to think for a minute about the largest gift you've ever given and how that makes you feel. How do you feel when you make a big donation? Like, it's a high. It hits on those endorphins. We feel really good. We're excited. We're bubbly. We get some color in our face, and we want to tell other people about it. And that's how it is for your donors as well. And that's why after people give particularly large donations, but every donation, we want to really capitalize on that. We want to thank people really well, because that's a time that we can have a lot of impact on those donors, fan the flames of those good feelings, and then they want to do it again. And that's really what we want to see. Okay, here's what fundraising is not. It's not begging. It's not arm twisting. Fundraising is not about selling stuff. Now, there may be things that you do to raise money that are selling a calendar, selling a t-shirt. I don't have anything against those, but I think when they're done well and they're done in moderation, and there's a balance between those transactional activities and the ones that make people feel warm and fuzzy, I think it can fit. It can be just fine, but you have to have the balance. Fundraising is not about hitting people up. I always say that fundraising is not a contact sport. We don't hit anybody. And yet this language shows up from time to time. So here's what's behind that. If you find yourself thinking or even saying, well, we'll just go hit up our best donors, there's something underneath that about taking advantage of those people. You're all focused on the money instead of the relationship. And deep inside, you probably feel a little bit manipulative or a little bit yucky about it. It doesn't feel good to you. So what I want you to do is become very aware of when you're either thinking those words or using that language, and start to eliminate that from your vocabulary. We don't hit people up. We invite them to participate in saving cats. That's what it is. And I'll say that again so you can write it down. Fundraising is about inviting people to participate in saving more cats. And the way they're going to do that is to provide funding or other resources. That's a game changer right there for some people. If you're struggling with any of the mindset, that's a game changer. It's just looking at it differently and seeing those people not as the golden eggs, but as the goose that lays them. Remember, you take care of the goose, the eggs keep coming. All right, let's look at the three-part formula for fundraising success. This part I love. I think you're going to really enjoy this. Good fundraising, donor-based fundraising, the kind that becomes sustainable and provides stability for your organization, really boils down to these three things. It's about getting in front of the right people at the right time with the right message. And when you do that, there will be a donation. It's inevitable. It can't not happen. When you're talking to the right people, those people who already love what your organization does, they just haven't heard about you yet, and you do it with a message that sets their heart on fire, and you do it at a time when they are receptive and ready to hear it, they will give the end every time. So who are the right people, and what is the right message, and when is the right time? Well, let's dig into that. I want to show you what each of these is about. So let's look at the right people. Now, if you can see the slide, you see there's a grid there with a whole bunch of different people on it. The first thing I want you to get is there are right people for your organization and there are wrong people. So how do you know who the right ones are? Is your right person the guy in the top row with the really pretty blue shirt on? Or is your right person the woman in the bottom row with the really pretty blue shirt on? Who's your right person? When you know who you're looking for, finding them gets a whole lot easier. Because really, here's the truth of the matter. When you have a big loyal donor base of people who are ideal for your organization, they love the work you're doing, it's like having a mountain of money. Because those people are going to support you, they're going to give when you ask, they're going to give often, and they're going to give big. And you don't have to feel guilty about any of that. They're your partners in your work, and they want to see you succeed. Think about this for a minute. Some of you probably already have, if not all of you, you've already got a donor or two like this. They're the ones that every time you ask, they give. Now, they may be giving $20 at a time or $10. It may not be a lot of money, but they're consistent about it. Every time you ask, they're right there. And on top of that, they might also be giving you supplies or volunteering or doing other things. That's who we're talking about here, is these ideal people who want to get behind you in a big way. Well, here's some things that are going to get in your way of finding those ideal people. So jot these down. Make sure that you understand these things that could get in the way so you can avoid them. The first is the passion myth. The passion myth says that people have to be just as passionate as you in order to support your organization. And it's just not true. I remember working with a founder many years ago that she believed this. She thought that she had to go find people who were just as passionate as her to give. And the truth is, there were a lot of people who cared very much about what her organization was doing, but they weren't as passionate as her. And she dismissed them and downplayed it and did not value them. So guess what happened? Some of those donors went away because they didn't feel valued, they didn't feel appreciated. You don't want that to happen to you. So understand that you might find some people who are just as passionate as you. You might not. As long as they care, that's all that matters. That's all we need. Broad appeal is another one that'll get in your way. Broad appeal is when you think, well, everybody in town ought to care about cats. Everybody ought to love animals. Everybody ought to get behind this. And the truth is they won't. The first thing you have to understand is not everybody makes a charitable contribution. Not everybody gives to charity. And of those people who do, everybody has their favorite. So somebody's favorite is going to be the ballet, and they don't care about the Cancer Society. For somebody else, they love the food bank, and they really don't understand why people give to support their alma mater. Other people are all about animal groups, and they'll give to multiple animal groups. We see that a lot. So we have to understand that your people care about what you're doing, and they may or may not care about other things, and it doesn't really matter. Now, here's a tip, and you can write this down. Most donors who give to anywhere from 3 to 5 organizations at the same time. So those people who are your best donors, they're very consistent, they're giving to you, They're also giving other places at the same time. Your job is to become their favorite. When you become their favorite organization, they will keep giving to you even if they have disruptions in their ability to give. So let's say they lose a job or somebody gets sick or there's an accident, they have a daughter with a wedding. I mean, there's any of those kind of things can happen. If you are their favorite organization, they will keep giving. So stash that in your head. We're going to talk in a little while about how to become their favorite. The last thing here that can get in your way is inconsistent outreach. That will kill your ability to grow a big loyal donor base. And I've seen this happen where organizations only look for new donors once or twice a year. And it's just not often enough. If you want to get serious about big loyal donor base, you want to get serious about fully funding your organization, I will promise you, you need a much, much larger donor base than what you have right now. You need a bigger donor family, and you've got to be looking for new people all the time. It's like having radar. Put your hands up next to your ears and poke your fingers straight up. You know, give yourself some little antenna, wiggle those fingers around. You've got to have that antenna up all the time. You got to always be looking for new donors, new people to support your organization. And what that can look like is everywhere you go, you're just thinking about, wow, I wonder if any of these people would like to support our organization. I used to do that all the time. There were an awful lot of things for me that I did very instinctually that I look back on now and I'm like, that was brilliant. We get invited, no matter where I worked, we get invited to mission fairs at churches or at businesses or um, chamber events or anything like that. And as I would go in, I would think, I wonder who in this room loves animals. I wonder who in this room might be a great donor for me. I wonder who in this room might care about my cause. And so I went into it with that mindset of looking for people who cared about what we were doing, not who in this room can I hit up for money? See, that's different. If I'm looking at for money, I'm basically staring at their wallet. And that's kind of uncomfortable for everybody. But if I'm really thinking about their heart and what they care about, that's easier. And by the way, it's so much easier when you're meeting somebody new at a crazy event like that to ask them what they care about rather than what they give to. It's a whole lot easier to talk about what their interests are charitably versus talking about money. But you got to have that radar up all the time. So you got to do consistent outreach. Now, let's dig in and talk about who your ideal donor is and how you find them. And I'm going to be able to give you some hints on this, but I want to walk you through the process first so that you understand it. This is a hardcore marketing term. This is just a marketing concept that works really well in nonprofit. Your ideal donor is somebody, and we're going to describe them almost as an avatar, if you've ever heard it talked about that way. But think about it this way as well. We're going to describe your typical best donor in some detail, and then we're going to use that to figure out where we can go find more just like them. So what we're going to use is demographics and psychographics to start figuring these out. Now, I know some of you just went, oh my gosh, those are big words. Hang in there with me. I think this will make sense. I've given you on the screen some suggestions of some of the things that you want to start looking at. Things like sex, age, values, what they do for fun, what kind of family they have, if they have a big family, little family, extended family, blended family, where do they spend their time, where do they spend their money, and what else? When you can start to understand this, it's so much easier to find them. If you want to make it simpler, do this. Just look at likes, values, and interests. What do they like? What's important to them, or what do they value? And what are they interested in? So I remember the first time that I heard this concept, I was working at the food bank and I'd gone to a food bank conference, and there was a guy there that was talking about ideal donors. And he said, we've already done the research and we're going to tell you who your ideal donor is. And I'm like, great. So he says, your ideal donor is female, 55 plus. She's educated. She has family, although she's probably got grandkids by now or grandkids on the way or coming soon. She's active in the community, probably volunteers someplace and attends religious services somewhere every week. And I don't know, there's a couple other things. So I'm listening to all this going, that is interesting. And I thought of a couple of donors that I could remember right off the top of my head, especially some of our bigger donors. And I thought, okay, does this woman match the profile? Does this woman match the profile? And everyone that I could think of matched that profile. And I thought that was fascinating. And so then I thought, okay, where can I go find more just like that? These women who are 55 plus, who are active in the community and attending religious services somewhere, where can I find them? And then I thought, you know what? I bet a lot of these church groups have women's clubs or women's groups, and I bet they need speakers. So I just asked around staff and board, hey, does your church have a women's group and do they look for speakers? And I rounded up like 3 or 4 talks really fast. Went out, talked to these groups, told them about what our organization was doing. Now, I think the key to this was I had a good talk. I had a good engaging talk. And by the time I left, I had a full sign-up sheet. So I'd passed around a list and everybody had signed up with their name and email. So I had a full sheet. People were sticking cash and checks in my hands like crazy. I was getting invitations to other speaking opportunities. And it was crazy. It worked so very well. And so instead of meeting people 1 or 2 at a time, like I might have at a chamber networking event, I would go do these speaking engagements and I would get 20 or 30 or even 40 or 50 names that I could take back and add immediately to our donor base. So that was a very effective way to use that ideal donor profile to go out and find more donors just like them. So that's what I recommend for you as well. When you start thinking about who your ideal donor is, by the way, I think, so the organizations that I work with that are all animal welfare, here's what we find. It does tend to be women, although we find that it can be women of all ages. They may have donors who are 25 and they may have donors who are 85 and everything in between. So all ages tends to be women, although you're going to get some men who give as well. We do find that they have pets of their own. They probably got kids. What the most interesting thing to me for a lot of the groups that we work with is their donors can't stand. They cannot stand suffering, abuse, or neglect, whether it's of children, people, elderly, or animals. Can't stand it. And that's the thing that we can use. That's definitely a thing we can use. We also know that they're animal lovers. So we say, all right, how do we use that? Well, here's an idea for those of you who do rescue and have adoption events. Think about those people who are talking to you at adoption events. They're interested in a cat or a kitten, and they're those of you who do adoptions, you've seen this. They'll stand and talk to you for a half hour, and at the end of it, they're like, "Yeah, I just don't think this is the right time for me to adopt," and they turn around and leave. If they're that interested to stand there and talk to you for that long, get their information because they would make a great supporter. So what you want to do, it can be very easy just to have a form or a sign-up sheet where you just pick it up and hand it to them with your with a clipboard and a pen and let them give you their name and email. It's a great way to find really good new supporters for your organization. All right, so you think about it for your organization and who you're looking for and who your ideal donor is. Where can you find them easily and in large numbers? Where can you find the ones you're looking for? And by the way, this whole process of identifying ideal donor, it does not have to be scientific. You can literally just think about the donors that you know and think about what they have in common and run with that to start. That's good enough to get you started. What this process does is it keeps you from wasting time on activities that are not going to bear fruit because you're going to go to the places where your ideal donors are already hanging out. I would say every single one of you needs to go out and speak at your local Rotary Club. There's Rotary Clubs literally around the world, and they all need a program every week. And usually the people who are members of Rotary are very community minded. They're supporting charitable organizations. A lot of them are serving on boards or they're volunteering. Rotary tends to be a really good place to go and find new opportunities, to find donors. Okay, so that was part one, getting in front of the right people. Let's go on to the right message. So messaging is really important. We are all absolutely bombarded every day with messages. One of the last numbers that I heard was by the time you get up in the morning to the time you lay down, you've been exposed to like 60,000 messages during the day. Isn't that crazy? It's a lot. We're all very overwhelmed. We're just drowning in information these days with access to the internet and social media and things. And so your message has to be crisp and clean to cut through the clutter. It can't just be you with the bullhorn shouting out, "Hey, we're over here, cat nonprofit, come support us." Like that doesn't work. Anything that's boring doesn't work. So we got to get you something that is going to work. Let me show you something. Can you tell what restaurant that is? I bet some of you already know. This is one of my favorite restaurants. It's the Cheesecake Factory. Some of you probably are just like me looking at this picture drooling. I love Cheesecake Factory. Holy moly, that cheesecake is amazing. And the thing is, in everyone that I've been to, and I've been to a lot of Cheesecake Factory restaurants. I wish I had a list. I bet across the country, I have probably been to 20 or 30 different Cheesecake Factory locations. And every single one that I go into, almost immediately when you walk in the door, boom, right on the right, there's this case, this glass case with all these cheesecakes in it. Why do they do that? Why do they have that right up front? And so they can get you started drooling right away. That is so juicy and it's so tempting and delicious that the only thing that's going to pull us away is when they say, "Hey, your table's ready." And we can actually go sit down, right? Your message has to be like this cheesecake. It's got to be juicy and delicious and captivating. If it's not, you're going to lose people. They're going to get bored and they're going to go away. They're not going to read. And if they don't read what you've sent, they can't take the action you want them to take. So when we're talking about messaging, we're talking about anything that you're putting out where you're using words, pictures, and video to convey something and to invite people to take action on something. It's got to be juicy and delicious, or otherwise they're not going to do it. Here's some things that are going to get in your way. The first is self-centeredness. I also refer to this as fundraising French because it sounds like this. We, us, us. We did this, we did that. Gosh, I was just looking at somebody's tax summary letter the other day, and the whole thing was just like that. It was like, we had a great year in 2017. We rescued this many horses. We opened this new program. We did this, we did that, us, we. And I'm thinking, if I'm a donor to that organization, that turns me off so fast because if I've given to that organization, I want to feel like I'm in the inner circle. I want to feel like I'm a part. And when they use that kind of language, I feel like, whoa, there's no place for me there. I don't like, they've got it all buttoned up and there's no room for me. It turns people off. So we have to be very careful of the self-centered language. Existence versus impact. This is actually, this is a mistake, and there's a nugget here that you can take to eliminate the self-centeredness and the existence language. And it goes like this. My friend Beth Brodowski first coined this several years ago. She said, people don't want to fund your existence. They want to fund your impact. Let me say that again. You can write that down. People don't want to fund your existence. They want to fund your impact. Here's what that means. You know how sometimes you have a campaign, like let's say Giving Tuesday, and you have a goal. Let's say your goal is $10,000. That's, if you don't put anything else around that, if you don't tell people what that money is going to be used for, you just go, hey, we've got this goal. It's our year-end goal. It's our Giving Tuesday goal. Whatever it is, it's $10,000. Please give. Or if you say, hey, we're trying to raise money for our annual fund, support our operations, help us meet our budget goals. That is all very self-centered. That's about supporting your existence, and people just don't really care. However, if you say, hey, we are trying to double the number of cats we save, it costs $5.47 to provide a day's worth of shelter and food and care for a cat. Please give. That's very different. Now that's where you're inviting people to support your impact instead of your existence. I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. Another thing that's going to get in your way is what we call jargon breath. Tom Ahern, some of you may have heard him speak. Tom says, Your message should set people's hearts on fire. Jargon is a flame retardant. So what is jargon? Jargon's all those words and phrases and acronyms and bits of things that we use that internally we all know what that is, but people outside of our organization don't. So here's one you've got to be very careful of, and that is TNR. We all know what that means. We all know why it's important and why people need to give to support that. But I'll guarantee you, you have people in your donor base or people who are following you on Facebook that don't know what that means, and they're too scared to ask because they don't want to look stupid. So what we have to do is remember we gotta create language for what I would call the least common denominator. Create language for the person in your donor base or in your world who knows the least about what you do. Language it for the person who knows the least, and then you'll always be safe. So you got to be really careful of the slang, the acronyms, like TNR. I think that's a great example. Even sometimes like words like community cats. Got to be real careful. Do people know what that means? If you go out and you're using that phrase, will the person who knows the least about your organization understand what that means? Now, what if you define it first, and then can you use that term? Yeah, you can in that letter, in that thank you letter, in that post, in that whatever it is. Yeah, you can do that. You just got to be really conscious that not everybody understands your organization to the depth that you do. Because really, remember, people are inundated with messages, and if they get something from you that they don't understand, they're going to tune it right out. So in this vein of jargon, let me give you a couple of really fun examples. So this is a phrase that has been jargoned up that has a very simple, commonly known equivalent. What is the very easy, old saying version of this? Members of an avian species of identical plumage congregate. And if you said birds of a feather flock together, you got it. See that? We can take something really simple and we can fill it full of jargon to where it almost doesn't make sense anymore and it's very difficult to understand. So we have to be very careful about that. Now, I'll raise my hand and say I was really guilty of this early on. I remember when I would go to write something, especially a grant, all of a sudden I felt like, oh, I've got to sound really smart. I need to put a lot of big words in here and big sentences so I can sound smart because I want my organization to be represented well. And the truth is, you actually get the opposite effect when you do that. When you try to sound really smart and use the big words, it actually alienates people when they don't understand the big words or they have to work too hard to try to read it. All right, I have another one of these because I think they're fun. See what you think. What's this really say? It's impossible to indoctrinate a superannuated canine. I love that. In innovative maneuvers. And if you said you can't teach an old dog a new trick, you got it. That's it. All right, let's do one more. Freedom from incrustations of grime is contiguous to possessing divine attributes. If you said cleanliness is next to godliness, you got it. All right, so you get that? Drop the jargon. Just get rid of all of that. Okay, I want to show you something that if you will take this and run with it, it will help you stay on task of talking about impact, not existence, and it'll help make your asks way more memorable and compelling to your donors. So let me give you this. It's called your core number. To find your core number, you first got to identify what your unit of service is. So for those of you who are doing rescue, a day's worth of care, like at the animal shelter in Cape Girardeau, we define their unit of service as a day of care. So that encompasses shelter, food, veterinary care, and then playtime and toys and that sort of thing too. If you do transportation, then it might be a number of miles that you're moving an animal. If you have a pet food pantry, it may be a pound of pet food. So you got to define what your unit of service is. And then what you want to do, and this is a great time to do it, is look back at the last year. So we can look at 2017 and look at all the units of service that you provided and your total expenses for your organization, not just the direct expenses, but total expenses, and you divide it out. and you get a result. And it can look like this. This is actually the number from Cape Girardeau from the animal shelter. Theirs is $6.20 a day to feed, shelter, and care for a cat. That's actual number. This is pretty cool. Now I know this can be hard because I know some of you are you're not numbers people, and you may have to go dig to find some of this. I'm working on this for last year for Horsehaven right now. We're having to dig to find out the number of units of service, the number of days of care that we provided, because we weren't doing a good job of keeping up with it as we went. So we're calculating that now. But when you get this number, think about all the ways that you can use it. It's so easy to use that in an ask. So if you're doing an appeal, whether you're sending out an email or a letter or you're putting it on social media, hey, $6.20 will provide a day's worth of care for a cat. Click here to give. That's easy. And then you can multiply that out by a week to get a week, or a month, or 6 months, or a year, whatever you want to do. But that number becomes really a good number. I like to see that number be $15 or less, because then it becomes a number that is almost a no-brainer. It's almost something that people go like, really? $6.20? That's too easy. Of course I'm doing that. And then if you start monthly giving, if you're inviting people to make an ongoing or a monthly donation, this is beautiful. And this is actually something that we've done in Cape Girardeau, is we literally have built a monthly giving program since about this time last year off of this number, the 620. And they've got some people who give 620 a month. They've got people who are giving, I think it's 43.20, which is about a week's worth of care, and everything in between. They've got people who give a whole lot more than that too, but this number makes it tangible for the donor. The donor can envision what their money is going to be used for, so they don't worry that the money is just going into some black hole. They don't worry that it feels like they don't know what's happening to their money. That's a bad thing. If people aren't sure, or if they feel like they can't trust you, they won't give. And I find that when you can share with a donor this kind of number, it gives them a sense of confidence in your organization that you must know what you're doing if you can figure this number out. So I invite you to take this formula, go take your total expenses and your total units of service and calculate this out, and then start using that number. The really big question when it comes to messaging is, what juicy thing are you asking people to support? Remember that case of cheesecake? Well, when you can tell people, hey, it's $6.20 a day, that's pretty juicy. That's way better than just, hey, give us 20 bucks. Trust us. That's a much more compelling thing to ask. It's a more compelling thing for people to give to. We could spend the rest of the day talking about messaging. It is so important. Things like e-newsletters. E-newsletters are critical for staying in touch with people, and yet most e-newsletters are total crap. I will tell you, if you want to see a really good one, Cape Girardeau has a pretty good one. You can go sign up for their newsletter. I believe it is SEMO, S-E-M-O, semopets.org. Another organization that I work with that is also in the animal space is Draft Gratitude. They rescue draft horses. They're based in New Hampshire. The girl who runs it, her name is Becky. She does the most kick-ass newsletter I think I've ever seen. It is spot on every time. It's super short. It's easy to read. If you start reading it, you're going to feel like you're on the inside circle. So I give you those two as examples of newsletters that you can go have a look at, and start to use those as inspiration for your own newsletter. Because the last thing you want to do in a newsletter is bore somebody. And unfortunately, most people throw their newsletter together in such a way just to check it off the list so that it's done. And we need to get out of that habit. We've got to really put those newsletters together, understanding that messaging is key to building relationships, and people are going to stick around and give as long as they feel like there's some kind of relationship there. All right, let's go to the right time. We've talked about right people, right message. Let's talk about right time. Now, if you can see the screen, we have a picture here of a young couple. Looks to me like they just got married. Do you think that she wore that dress on their first date? Probably not, right? Probably would have scared him off. there's something that happens very naturally and organically from the time that a couple meets until they're standing in these clothes. Yes? What are some of those steps? They have to get to know each other, right? They spend time together, they go to dinner, they go to the movies, they hang out, they do things together, right? And then they finally figure out they really like each other and they're ready for a deeper commitment. That's the way it goes with your donors. You don't want to get married on the first date. You want to give people a chance to get to know your organization so that when you ask, the timing is right. By the way, this young couple here, this is actually my daughter, just got married last May. She was a beautiful bride. Here's the bottom line when it comes to donor relationships. And honestly, this works for every relationship. Think of it as an account. And in this case, we have a little green piggy bank with a gauge on the side. As long as we are making deposits into that account, the account will stay open. As long as there's a positive balance and we're making deposits, it'll stay open. If that account hits empty, that account will close. Here's what that looks like with donors. As long as we are making deposits with our donors, and a deposit looks like a story that makes them feel good, a good thank you, a video update, photos of before and after, the rest of the story. So after a cat gets adopted or after your organization fulfills its mission, what happens next? So as long as we're doing the updates and we're staying in touch, we've got a positive balance. Every time we ask, whether we're asking for money, we're asking them to buy a ticket, we're asking them to volunteer, we are making a withdrawal. Think about that. If all you're doing is asking, you ask, of course the account is going to close. We all know somebody like that, don't we? Don't we know somebody or an organization that all they ever do is ask? They ask us for stuff all the time, and the messaging that we get from them is kind of boring. It's not great. I can think of a pretty large animal group right now that I'm on their list and I'm about ready to call them and go, you guys need some help. The emails they send out and their newsletters are so self-centered. All they do is talk about themselves, and there's nothing in there that compels me to want to give. Nothing at all. They do a lot of asking. We all know people like that, right? Thank God for caller ID, because we see them call and we're like, nope, I'm not taking that call. The same way with our donors. We gotta keep the deposits going so that there's a positive balance and the account stays open. Again, that's why an e-newsletter can be a very important tool if it's done well. If that e-newsletter is not done well, if it's long, if it's boring, if they have to work too hard to read it, then it doesn't add a deposit. It's actually a little frustrating to get a newsletter and be like, well, this is a waste of my time. Why is this even in my email? All right, here's some things that are going to get in your way with timing. The first is desperation mode. You can't show up as desperate. If you are desperate, they will know. Desperation stinks and donors can smell it. So even if you are desperate, don't act desperate. For some people, it's the ick factor. Asking for money is just uncomfortable. It makes you feel like you've got a third arm growing out your back, and we don't like it. It's icky. So we have to find a way to overcome some of that mindset so that it's not so icky. It's a little more comfortable to ask for money. Another thing that gets in your way is skipping the ABCs. These are ABCs of relationship building. Let me show you what those are. The first is to add value. People only stay in relationships that they're getting something out of, and donors are no different. It's your job to add value to the relationship so that donors stick around. The really, really easy way to do that is keep them updated. Tell them stories about things that you've done that have been successful. Whether you're rescuing cats or you hit your goal on TNR, you've done more TNR, your pet food pantry is bustling and booming, whatever your organization does, tell them the stories so that they go, oh, that is awesome. I love that organization. They're doing good work. The burden of building that relationship is on you. So you got to add value. And the easiest way to do that is stories. You got to build trust. Trust is critical to any relationship, and it is definitely on your shoulders to do that. Building trust in a nonprofit is really about transparency. It's about being very open and answering people's questions. So if somebody wants to know about your finances, you need to be willing to share them. Your financial records are public information anyway, or they should be. Your 990 certainly is. Be willing to share. If donors get a hint that there's something squirrely going on, or you don't want to share information, that makes them not want to give to you. So build trust. Other simple ways to build trust: do what you say you're going to do. Report back every year, even just in a very simple annual report of what your organization did during the year, so donors have some idea, and the community has some idea what your organization did. Return phone calls, answer emails, respond on social media. All of those things build trust, and they're pretty simple to do. The C in our ABCs is about cultivating interest. It's your job to keep people interested in your organization. Your organization is probably top of mind for you because you're in it every day. You live it, you breathe it. For your donors, maybe some of your volunteers, it's not. Your donors have very busy lives. They have jobs, they have family, they have 1,000 other things they're doing. So remembering about your organization is not on the top of their priority list. Your job to keep them interested, to keep cultivating that interest so that they remember every now and again. They're like, oh yeah, what's that cat rescue group doing? Wonder what's happening over there with them. That's your job. People ask me a lot about asking. How often can we ask people to give? And I want to give you a really simple answer to that in the 3-to-1 ratio. You can ask as often as you want, as long as in between the asks you have 3 really good, warm, fuzzy, juicy, compelling communications. So what does that look like? That can be a really well done e-newsletter. It can be a video update. It can be a thank you call or a thank you letter. It can be a photo or a video on social media if they see that. It can look like a lot of different things, but the important thing is that there's more of the communication than of the asking. Because remember, when you're doing those updates and the communication, that's adding deposits into that account. Every time you ask is a withdrawal. So you want to do 3 really good communications, because that's going to be like deposit 1, deposit 2, deposit 3. And then when you ask, people are ready to give and they don't feel like all you're doing is asking them for stuff. That actually works really well with so many things in nonprofit, to make sure that you're communicating more than you're asking. Now, the caveat to that is those communications have got to be good. They've got to be the kind of thing that people read and go, I love that nonprofit. They are doing such good work. Love what they're doing. Really, the bottom line here is all about trust. People give to nonprofits they trust. They volunteer with nonprofits they trust. They recommend nonprofits they trust. And by recommend, they tell other people. So it's all about trust. It's all about being accountable for what your organization is supposed to be doing, being transparent, and doing the best job that you can of building those relationships. All right, I want to pivot just a little bit and talk about fundraising strategies. Specifically, we're going to get into the 110-1000 rule. Unfortunately, a lot of nonprofits have strategy like this cartoon. It's a little complicated, and it doesn't need to be quite so complicated. We can keep it very simple. The problem is that you have limited time during the day, and so you've got to make sure that you're putting your precious resources of time and creativity and energy and money into those things that are going to have the biggest payoff for you. You want to stay away from nickel and dime activities. Those are, for me, this is Buffalo Wild Wings night. At Horse Haven, we used to do that. We have Buffalo Wild Wings here, and it's one of those deals where you sign up and they give you a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night or whatever. And then we made up a flyer and we gave them out to as many people as we could and said, go into Buffalo Wild Wings on this night, take this flyer, give it to your server, and they're going to give a portion of their proceeds to us. And we'd work really hard on the flyers, and we worked really hard getting those flyers out. And at the end of the day, we'd make like maybe $100, $150 off of the Buffalo Wild Wings night. Yeah, And at some point, several years ago, our board, we just drew a line in the sand and we said, we can't do that anymore. We cannot work so hard on something that's going to generate so little. Now, I know for some of you, maybe $150 is a lot of money, but you got to be thinking big. If you want to raise big money, you got to be thinking about bigger strategies than that. So stay away from anything that's a nickel and dime activity. You know what they are because they make your heart sink every time you think about them. You work really hard and then it's over and you're like, well, crap, that only raised a couple $100 and now we got to go again. Stay away from the sole source funding. We talked about that earlier. Stay away from the same old thing. For those of you who've been around for a while, you're probably doing some fundraising just because you always have, and that's a really bad reason to do anything. Do something because it works and it moves you towards your goals, not because you always have. Things that get in the way of good strategy: no time, no template, no support. How many of you feel that way? Like, I don't have time to figure this out. I wouldn't know where to start with figuring it out. I don't have a template and it's just me. I don't really have anybody who helps me do anything. So this is all really hard. I get that. I get that. So I want to show you the 110-1000 rule that I think is going to make this a little easier as you start thinking about what you want to include and how you want to arrange your fundraising for the year. So here we go. Make sure you write this down. You start with one signature event, one fundraising event. Now, adoption events, those are different. Volunteer recruitment events, that's different. Community education, that's different. So we're talking about fundraising events here. Do one fundraising event a year. That's it, one. Don't do a fundraising event a month. Why? Fundraising events are labor intensive. I have yet to see one that wasn't. It takes a lot of time, a lot of attention, a lot of energy, and you need to do it really well, hit it out of the park, and then move on because there's a lot of other stuff you need to be doing. So this is actually a picture from our Horse Haven event. It's kind of a dumb event, but it works really well. It's called Dancing for the Horses. It's a takeoff on Dancing with the Stars. In 2014, this event raised $16,000. And that was gross. By the time we took out our expenses, we probably made, I don't know, $10,000 or $11,000. It wasn't, I mean, on the one hand, yeah, it's a lot of money. On the other hand, for the organization and where it was not. And that year I said to our director, I'm like, look, we got to crank this up. She said, great, you're in charge. Okay, I walked into that. So we put a committee together. We'd never had a committee for the event before. And we upped the sponsorship levels and we went after a bunch of sponsors. And this past year in May of 2017, this is actually a picture from May 2017, that event made $117,000. That's a huge jump. We grew that event $100,000 in 3 years. It's a signature event for us now. What makes it a signature event is people in town know that event is our event. They know it's a fun event. They look forward to it. It is a big party. We do line dancing at one point. You can see there's limited space in this venue. And so actually we've already raised the ticket price for this year because we can't put any more people on in that room. You may have a different kind of signature event. It might be it could be a walk. I've got a client that does a furry scurry that is a signature event for them, and it works really well. The shelter in Cape Girardeau does something called Raise the Woof. That's a comedy night. It doesn't matter what the event is. What matters is that you do it well. You pour everything you have into it. You get as much sponsorship money as you can, and then you move on to something else. Don't be doing little event after little event after little event. It wears you out, wears your volunteers out, wears the community out. I could spend an hour telling you all about this event and how crazy it is and how it was painful to grow it that much, but it's also been very exciting to have a big event that is that successful. All right, the 10 and 110-1000 is grants. Go after the grant money that you can. Why 10? Well, I have 2 grant writers on my team here at Get Fully Funded, and we do research for all kinds of organizations. We can almost always find 10 really good, hot grant leads, sometimes a whole lot more, sometimes a little less. The point here is go find out what grant opportunities are available to you and go after them. Don't leave grant money on the table. This newspaper clip here is actually from Draft Gratitude. I just mentioned Becky a minute ago. I helped her get this was I believe her first grant. I helped her get this a couple of years ago from the Doris Day Foundation, and that was really exciting for her. And I think her organization was 2 years old at the time, so it was very young, very small organization, and we got her a grant, and that was very exciting. So again, don't leave grant money on the table. If you can clearly identify your programs, and if you can write persuasively, you can get grants. They're out there. Then what you need to do after you get those two things taken care of is go build your donor base up to 1,000 donors. Why 1,000? Well, trust me that that's what you're probably going to need for a big loyal donor base, and it changes the game. I'm going to show you some math in just a second. I know for some of you 1,000 may be very overwhelming, so take it in 100 people chunks at a time. One of the programs that I lead is called ARF Club, and we have a whole module on this of just identifying where your next 100 donors are and going after them in very small chunks. And when you break it down into some smaller pieces, it's a whole lot easier to manage. It's a whole lot easier to find a way to make it happen. You don't get overwhelmed and stuck. All right, let me show you the math on this. This is why 110, 1,000. I know that there are a lot of really small organizations out there who maybe are trying to get to $100,000 as a budget, or yours might be a little more, a little less. And the nice thing is you can scale this. But if you're doing a signature event that's generating 25,000, and yes, you can do that. Even if you have an event right now that the most you've raised is a couple $1,000s, you can bump it. I have a client outside of the world of animal welfare. She actually works with orphans in India. We started an event this past year for her. It was a virtual event, and the gist of it was go out and enjoy a curry dinner, and then make a donation to support one of these orphans so that they get to eat for the next year. First time out of the box, we literally made it up and threw it out there, and she did about $11,000 on that event the first time. She does not have a huge donor base. She does not have a huge following on social media, but we put a plan together and we went after it. Will she do double that this coming year? Probably. She'll come close to 20 or 25,000 this year. So I know that sort of thing is possible. It's about how much energy you put into it. So let's say you have an event that's doing 25, you've got some grants that are coming in the neighborhood of 25,000, and then you build that donor base up. So you have 1,000 people who are each giving you $50. Look how that math works out. Those 1,000 people could be giving you a $50 check once or a $25 check twice a year. And maybe you have maybe you're doing better at grants and you're already getting maybe 25 or 35,000 in grants, and you can start to play with these numbers. Or if you don't need 100,000, you only need 50,000 for your budget, and scale the whole thing down. But the nice thing is you can play with it a little bit. And when you follow this formula, it helps create diverse revenue streams for your organization. And that's really where the stability is going to come from. Because the nice thing here is if you lose one sponsor on your event, or one of those $2,500 grants goes away, or you lose a donor, it's okay. You've got all these other places where money is coming in from, and you can handle it. You can make that money up pretty easily. All right, now what? I've shown you a lot of stuff today. We've talked about underfunded versus fully funded organizations. We've looked at reasons why your fundraising may not be working for you. We looked at the 3-part formula for success. I showed you the 3-to-1 ratio, the 110, 1,000 rule. What now? Okay, so 2 things that I would recommend you do right now, or by the time before your head hits the pillow tonight. You can do this for the entire conference that you've experienced this weekend. Go through your notes and highlight the best ideas. Take a highlighter, highlight the best ideas, and then circle the top 1. Mark out some time on your calendar next week and get started implementing that one idea. Here's why you need to do that. It's really easy to come to a conference and hear a lot of great ideas and get excited. And if you don't find a way to start integrating that new knowledge, then all of your notes are going to go into a notebook or into a folder on a shelf, and you'll never look at them again. And then basically this was just fun. I don't want it to be fun. I want you to get some great stuff out of this conference and especially out of this session. So highlight your best ideas, circle the top one, mark off some time and get busy. I'd also recommend that you set some real specific goals. So if you're excited about building a big loyal donor base, I want you to set a goal. How many donors do you want to add to your donor base by the end of 2018? How about by the end of March? Break it down into some smaller goals. Get a written plan together. Written plans can change the game. When you have a plan for fundraising and it is in writing, it is a whole lot easier to stick to that plan compared to the plans that are in your head. You know how that goes. When you have plans in your head, it's really easy to change them on the fly, and then nobody else knows what you've committed to doing. So get your plan in writing. I have a couple of things for you that I think are going to be helpful. One is I do have a download that you can go get for free off my website. It's the one page quick and simple fundraising plan. It actually has 5 or 6 pages in the ebook, but it has a template in it that you can use that I think you're going to really like. It's makes planning out, especially using the 110-1000 rule, much easier. And you'll find that at getfullyfunded.com/plan. Just go put your name and email in there, and it will automatically email you that plan, and you can start using that right away. And if you want a little more help, we also have, I think I mentioned earlier, we have a program called ARF Club that is coaching and training that's specific for animal welfare. There are about 70 organizations from all over the US and Canada in that group right now, where we provide them with ongoing training. We have a private Facebook group that's very active, so you can pop in there anytime and ask questions about fundraising or your board or marketing. People have been in there actually this week talking about shelter software, and we've had people asking about fees with adoption applications and other things. So it's a pretty cool resource. If you're interested in that, you can get more information at arfclub.com. Pretty cool resource that will help you with fundraising and marketing, board development, all that, so you can save more cats. Be sure and stay in touch. I'd love to know what you've gotten out of this session, what your favorite parts were. If you've got any questions, I think we've got a few minutes that we can answer some questions.
Sandy, that's great. So much information. I've got notes and notes written here, so this is fantastic. So one question that I hear all the time, and I saw it mentioned several times today, is how to convince your board to fundraise specifically for your own program. And I'm under the assumption that it mainly is like a TNR program. Boards tend to be more focused on fundraising for other components. Usually the TNR program is funded by a large grant, and then what happens when that large grant runs out, and if they decide not to renew, then that program just becomes unfunded, and then the program falls apart. So, as a volunteer who's working in a TNR program, how can they work to sort of lobby with their board to kind of get their TNR the fundraising respect it needs?
Okay, I hear about 3 different questions in that one question. One is, how do I get my board to do fundraising? And that's one issue. On any given board, there are usually really good people, but if you have 10 board members, you might have one who's comfortable raising money, and the rest of them are busy that day. They don't want anything to do with anything that's remotely smells like fundraising. They just don't want that. So that's one issue. And that honestly is a training and mindset issue to get board members to understand that they need to help raise money because that's their job. Another issue that I hear in there is, what do we do to raise money specifically for TNR, especially if we've got a grant and we know that that grant is not going to last forever? That's a strategy issue. That's a strategy issue around like the minute you get that grant, you got to be thinking about, what are we going to do to fund this when that grant runs out? Don't wait until the grant runs out and go, oh, now how are we going to raise money? Because you know that grant's not going to go forever. So that's a strategy question of, how do we raise money for specific programs? And you can do that. Program-specific fundraising happens all the time. I help people with that all the time. And it's a matter of just really refining the message for that program and launching it out there, so that you can find those people who love that program and want to support that. And then the other question that I heard in there is, what if you're a volunteer and you care very much about the TNR, how do you have any impact at all with a board when you're a volunteer? That's the more difficult question. And what I would recommend there is find a member of the board that you feel comfortable having conversation with, especially if it's somebody that you know, and express your concerns to them and brainstorm a solution and then let them take that back to the board. That's probably the best way to do it. Anytime you can have a champion on the inside, you're more likely to get what you're looking for with that. But I know it can be difficult, and we have a fair number of people in our club who are volunteers, and they express some frustration in trying to deal with a board, particularly a board that is not inclusive, a board that wants to do things their way. That can be really hard.
Great. Julie Jacobson also chimes in here, just saying that the Doris Day Foundation will fund TNR, and there's more info on the Community Cats Grants homepage, or there's information on other grants. And another thing to try too is, when one grant runs out, try for some other grants. And you've sort of mentioned that in your 110, 1000 lineup is those 10 grants may not always be the same 10 foundations. It may be different ones over time too.
You're exactly right. And by the way, the Doris Day Foundation also is very interested in senior animals. So if anybody has programs that are specifically for seniors, if you're trying to pull seniors out of the shelter or something, they're interested in that as well.
And they did fund a pet food pantry that I'm involved with up here in Vermont too.
Cool.
Yeah. Someone asked, could you repeat the names of the newsletters that you referenced earlier in the presentation? I think one was Draft Gratitude, and I forget what the other one was.
Yep, draftgratitude.org, and they're real close to you. They're over in Winchester, New Hampshire. Draftgratitude.org, and the other one is the Humane Society in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and I'm pretty sure their website is semopets.org. SE, which is Southeast Missouri, SEMO, semopets.org. Their newsletter is good. Probably because I have my hands in it.
So one question that came in, does it help in the partnership to have a business able to advertise, like as a proud partner or sponsor of XYZ Cat Rescue? How does the relationship work between a nonprofit and a business sponsor?
If you have a business that's a pretty big business and well known in your area, and you can put that on there that you're sponsored by, if your organization is really small, that can give you some credibility just for people to see, oh, that business is sponsoring this organization. Well, they must be a good organization then. So that can really help. And it can be difficult to get those sponsorships, and once you have them, you really want to nurture the relationship so that they stick around. That's a whole other conversation we can have around businesses. A lot of times their sponsorships come in the form of event sponsorships, but you can get sponsorships just for the organization as a whole.
And this will be my last question, and it's my question, which is, over the years when I was involved with the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society, I ran into a lot of staff members as well as volunteers, primarily volunteers. They would say, oh, well, I volunteer because I just like being around cats and I really don't like people. But isn't everybody sort of responsible for being either a steward of the organization or a fundraiser? And how do you get that culture through a whole organization?
Yeah, that is a great question. And you're right, it is about culture. The thing with volunteers is they're going to do what they want to do, and you can't necessarily force them to do something else. So if you have people that come out and they are cleaning cages every day, or once a week or twice a week, whatever they're doing, and that's what they want to do, and that's their contribution, you kind of got to be grateful for that and let that be. It's fine to, and I think it's a good thing to have a culture of philanthropy within your organization and to try to encourage volunteers to participate as well. But if they don't, you can't force them to. And honestly, you have to just back up and go, well, I'm really grateful they come out and do what they do a couple of times a week anyway. You certainly want to give them the opportunity to do more, but if they don't, just be grateful and move on to the next person.
Excellent, excellent. All right, Kristen, I'm gonna give you a shout out. We're gonna do the raffle drawing, and Sandy, I want to thank you again so much for your donation of your was it the 10K fundraising book that you have. And so Kristen has a little picture of that she's going to put up, 10K fundraising for animal rescue. Sandy, this was a great presentation. I want to thank you so much for preparing that and being with us today. So here's the picture of the wonderful book that Sandy will send out. And for folks that haven't participated, we read a trivia question, and whoever answers the question correctly first in the question box will get the prize. So have those fingers right on your laptop, ready to go. Move the cats away. Here's the trivia question. Humans have unique fingerprints. Cats have a unique print from this part of their body.
Oh, I know.
Oh, that was a quick one. Lee Massey, you had the
right.
first.
Congratulations, Leah. All right, so Leah, you know the game. You now have to just type in your mailing address in there, and I will email it to Sandy, and Sandy will send it out. Thank you again, Sandy, for doing that.
Answer. We've got to get better about telling people the answers. Everybody keeps asking. The answer is the nose. The nose is the unique print on each cat.